What is up, freaks? It's your boomer Uncle Marty here to introduce this episode of Tales from the Crypt. Sat down with Kelly Lannon, creator of Bitcoin Urbanism, an incredible Substack, talking about how we're going to bring back good city planning, good classical architecture, and just good aesthetics all around under a Bitcoin standard. Uncle Marty had a pretty massive boomer moment last night, freaks. Sunday night. Just poured my water in my Yeti, about to go to bed. Get tucked in before 10:30. Your boomer Uncle Marty fell down the stairs. It hurt. It cut up my arm. My back's really sore. I fell down every stairs. I felt like I'm not even 30 years old yet, but I felt like the guy in the Life Alert commercial, laying at the bottom of the stairs. My wife's screaming, "What the hell's going on?" I'm screaming, "Help, I can't get up. I've fallen and I can't get up." Water all over me. It hurt. It was scary. It happened really quickly. Be aware of the stairs, freaks. This is the PSA to start this episode out. Be aware of the stairs. Maybe my stairs weren't designed correctly because we live under a fiat monetary system, and Kelly will get into that. There's a lot of shit going on. Like this episode of Kelly, I think it's very important. Getting back to my roots at TFTC, finding relatively undiscovered gems in the Bitcoin space. I think Kelly is one of them. I think the subject that he's focused on is highly interesting, and I think his background as a real estate developer brings a lot of interesting context to the Bitcoin discussion, but as well as the inflation discussion that we've been touching on and on about throughout the whole history of this podcast, but more acutely in the last year as the economic shutdowns have happened and the money printing has happened. Kelly's proximity to the increased prices of materials for building is very interesting, and it's a very scary situation. There's inflation happening. I don't want to say the word hyperinflation yet, but the way in which these real estate developers are having to either shut down building projects or cough up more money immediately when they go to buy materials. Not good. Not good. We do end it on the episode's very optimistic though, but I think it's, if you're interested to learn about what's going on behind the scenes in the real estate world, in the construction world, is some incredible insight from somebody who is living it every day. So I think you guys are going to enjoy this episode. It's brought to you by our good friends at the motherfucking Cash App. You guys already know all about them. They're helping you stack sats, send sats, receive sats, sell sats, if you so please. We're saying sats, because sats are the standard. There are 100 million sats in one Bitcoin, and they're getting more expensive, freaks. I know we just had a little dump today, but still, one cuck buck's going to get you like 1,500 sats, I believe. Let me pull up the dashboard. Right now, 1,700. 1,776 to be exact, actually. Very, very interesting. But yeah, it's getting harder and harder to get into the Satoshi Millionaire Club. If you're paying attention, it's more expensive. So make sure you're stacking. Cash App allows you to do that. Cash App can also be your bank account. They offer account numbers and routing numbers. You get your paychecks direct deposited into the app so you can stack quicker. What else? Be aware of the withdrawal limits. Their limits 2,000 daily, 5,000 weekly. Make sure you're getting it off the exchange of Cash App as you're stacking, so you don't get stuck on. Hopefully they're going to fix that problem. I think they're working on it. Use the code STACKINGSATS. That's STACKINGSATS. You're going to get $10, and $10 is going to go to our good friends Owls Lacrosse. That's Owls Lacrosse. Woo! 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 Freaks, we got a new sponsor. Okay? And I'm very, very, very excited to have these guys on the TFTC roster. They are an incredible company in the Bitcoin space, and they've really stayed true to the ethos of Bitcoin and work to make better products around it. Brains, they're longtime freaks. And again, it's exciting to have them back have them officially on as a sponsor for the first time. You probably know them again for their mining software, Slush Pool, Brains OS Plus, and there's a team working on Stratum V2 as well. Jan and Pavel, who are the co-founders of Brains, they came on TFTC back in 2019, episode number 73. They talked about the history of Slush Pool and mining, Brains OS, Better Hash, which back then they were sort of mulling Stratum V2 over, and that's what Better Hash got replaced with Stratum V2, which is what they were working on, the ASIC manufacturer sector of the industry. They've been building firmware for that. They've got hash rate markets coming out and more. Edward Evanson, cheese hater, notorious cheese hater, he was on at 199 talk about custom firmware. Again, the update on Stratum V2 and a bunch of other things. Go check out those episodes, 73 and 199. Brains are leaders in the mining industry. They've been the company running Slush Pool since 2013. They took over Slush Pool. They officially bought Slush's stake earlier this year as well. They've been one of the only mining pools against Bcash from the beginning. Roger Ver called Slush Pool the biggest Bitcoin Core cheerleader pool, which is interesting. And they never mind any of the Bitcoin fork coins. They have developers on Brains OS Plus, which is a custom firmware to help miners stack more sats by auto-tuning the voltage and frequencies on each chip in the ASICs to achieve better terahash per watts. Try to make the miners more efficient so miners can stack more sats. In other words, stack as many sats as possible with the user set power consumption. It's very technical, but they're helping miners stack more sats. Brains teams led by Jan and Pavel. They did the work to verify overt ASIC boost as well. They open sourced the Antminer S9 firmware back when Bitmain was the only dominant hardware manufacturer, and centralization was much more worrying. They were there to help shed light on this part of Bitcoin. So yeah, they're leading Stratum V2 as well, along with Matt Corallo and others at Square Crypto. Brains is a working implementation of Stratum V2 on Slush Pool and included in the Brains OS Plus firmware. So if you guys are running that firmware, want to test it out, I'll be the first on their list to get product updates. So keep listening to TFTC if Slush Pool comes out with anything new, if Brains OS comes out with anything new. The Brains team is building incredible things. So yeah, great to have them on the roster. So go check them out. We'll link to their website in the show notes. Go check out everything they're doing. If you're a miner, definitely check out their firmware if they have it available for your model. It's pretty incredible. While we have them, while we're talking about mining, we should mention Compass as well. Compass is another sponsor that's working to make sure that individuals can stack sats via mining as well. They're going to really simplify the process of buying a miner and finding a place to plug it in. That's how I like to describe it. They take away all the headaches from working with manufacturers or secondary markets to get an ASIC and then finding somewhere to plug it in. So you can go to compassmining.io. That's compassmining.io. And you'll be able to go there. You'll be able to pick a miner that you want. You buy it, and then you pick a hosting place with a competitive cost of power production, electricity price, and then you point it there and you say, hey, I want to plug it in here. They get the miner, they plug it in, and you start stacking sats that way. So go check it out, compassmining.com, compassmining.com. They want to make sure the little guy's mining. They're going to make it easier for you. They got great customer service, and they're going to take you from zero to mining in no time. So go check it out. Last but not least, our good friends at HODL HODL. They have their new Lend product. If you guys don't want to sell your Bitcoin, HODL HODL has a new non-custodial Bitcoin-backed lending platform. It allows peer-to-peer lending and borrowing between users globally, anonymously, and on your own terms. HODL HODL has nothing to do except for the multi-sig escrow. So if you're short funds, you don't want to sell your Bitcoin, you get some liquidity by borrowing, use your Bitcoin as collateral. And the great thing is that you don't need to entrust someone with your funds. Again, it's held in a multi-sig escrow where your collateral remains there, locked in escrow, and you control one of the keys to it. If you have some stable coins laying around, you want to get some yield on that. If you're a stablecoin guy or girl, Lend at HODL HODL. This product also offers a way for you to get return on those stable coins. So go create your offers and set your own terms at lend.hodlhodl.com. That's lend.hodlhodl.com. Go check it out. These are incredible products. The whole suite. love our sponsors. Thank you guys for sponsoring us. Thank you for joining us. Beware of stairs. Help, I've fallen and I can't get up. I literally had to like scream that to my wife last night. It's not fun. Take care of yourselves. Watch where you're stepping. And enjoy this episode with Kelly Lannon.
You've had a dynamic where money's become freer than free.
If you talk about a Fed just gone nuts, all the central banks going nuts.
So it's all acting like safe haven.
I believe that in a world where central bankers are tripping over themselves to devalue their currency, Bitcoin wins. In the world of fiat currencies, Bitcoin is the victor.
I mean, that's part of the bull case for Bitcoin.
If you're not paying attention, you probably should be.
One. Kelly Lannon, everybody.
Oh, what's up, Uncle Marty? Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. One of the tallest Bitcoiners I've ever met in person.
I would like to take that mantle, but unfortunately, Ryan Gentry's got me by like an inch and a half. Even with my cowboy boots on, that was not fair. And I told him that he didn't provide sufficient notice. Otherwise, I would have worn taller ones.
I met you two, I believe, on the same day in person. BitBlock Boom. Yeah. What's going on? We were just talking about the climate hysterics and their attacks on Bitcoin, and you were going into God Sod's book, The Parasitic Mind. What is wrong with these people?
So kind of the premise of Gad Saad's book is that there are infectious ideas, and that like a parasite, these ideas kind of take over the host essentially. So for the climate hysterics who decided to hit the red button this morning and wake up Bitcoin Twitter, it's this notion that no matter what they believe, they're always right. And that just because they have the idea, not necessarily that the idea is accurate or reflected in reality, it's just that they're right. So it's synonymous with wokeness, with the energy FUD, with Bitcoin FUD. So the guys like Neuro Rubini, Peter Schiff, they have the Bitcoin hate parasite going on.
Can the parasite be avoided? Do we have mental parasites ourselves as Bitcoiners?
It's certainly possible, but it's more of a situation where you're totally ignoring reality. So you're creating your own bubble and your own reality, and you live in essentially an echo chamber. But your echo chamber doesn't jive with the outside world at all. So I think Bitcoin is a good example, especially like in the energy FUD. These guys are going, especially, you with GAM are going out to these oil and gas companies and saying, hey, don't put that methane in the air. Let's burn it, turn it into CO2, turn it into some plant food, and we're going to mine Bitcoin while we're at it. Everybody's happier. So that I think that's a reflection of a reality-based mindset, whereas like the energy FUDsters are like, we're boiling the oceans and, more fossil fuels is bad and all these other things.
Yeah, are the oceans boiling? I actually live right down the street from the beach. Walked down with my son this morning to check on the ocean. Looked pretty cold to me.
Yeah, you didn't have to take an extra step to get to the ocean, though, did you? You're a little worried that it's receding?
No. Yeah, it was high tide, and the tide was where it usually is at high tide.
Oh, what a shame.
We're gonna get canceled for this. We're gonna
that's
get canceled,
okay.
Kelly. I hope I'm just waiting to get canceled.
Yeah. Well, at least it'll make it for an entertaining day on Twitter.
Right. Well, it's I'm not trying to get canceled, but it's just, again, like nobody brings common sense or logic to this argument. Like yesterday's bent that I wrote, it was just about like our detractors, Bitcoin's detractors, not me and you personally. They don't do the research to understand actually like what's working or how Bitcoin works and the intricacies of the network, the incentive systems, the way in which Bitcoin miners go to seek out the lowest cost of energy production that tends to be wasted energy and significantly renewable when you compare it to I think every other industry in the world. When you compare Bitcoin mining to every other industry, it has by a percentage basis the most penetration of renewable energy. Like it's mind blowing.
Well, I guess better busy than bored. What's the name of the law where it takes an order of magnitude more work to disprove bullshit than it does to create it?
Yeah, I don't know the name of the law, but it's a great one and it's very true.
Yeah.
I'm like gotten to the point where it's just LOL HFSP.
Yeah, I liked the South Park Cartman tears this morning. I think that's the proper response going forward.
Yeah, just feed me your tears, Harper. We're not here to talk and give attention to the climate hysterics, even though we just spent the first 5 minutes of this recording doing that. We're here to talk about Bitcoin urbanism.
Yeah,
it's a fascinating newsletter that you've been writing, a fascinating topic, one I've been fascinated about for years now, and have written about not Bitcoin urbanism specifically, but the potential to bring better aesthetics and city planning and urban planning to the world under a Bitcoin standard. How did you get fascinated with this topic and be so driven to write a newsletter about it?
Well, so I do real estate as a profession. So I'm a developer. I'm an evil developer, Marty. I come into your neighborhood, I buy old buildings or sites, and I go to the city council and I say, I'm going to build a tower or whatever you will reasonably let me do. And then I piss off all the neighbors and I get some sort of approval. Then I build it and then fill it with people and sell it. So my dad is was a home builder here in Phoenix. He came out here in the 80s, got his start in real estate. And, so I basically grew up on a job site, sweeping streets. I like to say I never really got grounded. I just got sent to the job site. So, that was a formative experience. If you've never dug a ditch with a tweaker, I recommend not doing it at all. But yeah, so I've always been interested in real estate. There's pictures of me as a kid building sandcastles or, Legos or all that. So I've always been fascinated by it. I probably should have been an architect growing up if my dad, at dinner didn't say those fucking architects or these consultants every day, and just thinking to myself like, well, maybe I don't want to do that. But after college, I started doing it full time. That was right around, I moved back from Colorado to Arizona in 2008. The summer of 2008 when shit really hit the fan. And my first job was driving all over Phoenix, looking at these foreclosed homes, right? So back in the day when it all started, they would do like an auction once a month, and it'd be like 1,200 homes that they would do over the course of like 2 or 3 days. So they'd publish the list in advance. I would drive around and basically fill out like an inspection sheet, essentially. So I got to know Phoenix very well. And to give the freaks an idea, I could only do 10 or 11 homes a day. And that's basically how big Phoenix is. And I had, Google Maps. I would plan out my whole trip for that day, trying to get all this stuff done. And it would take me 6 days. I'd be doing it for 6 days a week. It was crazy. But so anyways, so I continued on, and then I had always been a fan of Manhattan, photos and stuff like that. I had been there once as a kid. Can you hear that?
Yeah, I can, but it's fun. Is your dog humping something?
No, that's my cat. I forgot to.
Okay.
So anyway, so I went there as an adult for a blockchain real estate deal back in the day. Mm-hmm. And I was just absolutely fascinated. Like the way I describe it, I guess the only way it made sense to me is that I walked around and looked at all these old buildings in the West Village and all that. And like these buildings just sung to me. So I was like, damn. And like shortly thereafter, I just started doing some research. And oh my goodness, can you hear that?
Yeah, I can, but it's fine. It's whatever.
Okay. I played with the cat and everything to chill him out and gave him some treats. Usually he falls asleep, but I guess not. Anyways, so shortly thereafter, I started doing some research about like why doesn't Phoenix look like Manhattan? Like all these buildings are old. Phoenix, everything is new. All these buildings are like 100 feet apart. and like, what the hell's going on? So that was about the time that I found Strong Towns. And I know you've had Chuck on the podcast. And so I did like a deep dive into like, how we started and how we got here kind of thing. And I was just absolutely fascinated.
Right.
Oh my goodness.
Don't worry about it. It's fine.
Okay. So I was just absolutely fascinated by it. And I just started reading everything that he had written, basically starting from like 2011 going forward. And I was just like, oh my God, everything is so fucked up. So from my perspective, I'm the one basically, buying land and then putting the plans together, site plans, building plans, all this other stuff, taking it to the city, getting approvals, all that. And I began to look at my plans and I'm like, oh my goodness. So in development, you have what's called lot coverage, right? So let's say that you live in like a single family house and your plot of land is like 10,000 square feet, right? So you're limited to like a third of that to build on. And there's all these other rules that, it's insane, the quantity of rules. So, so I had found that, and then recently, before that, I had read Saifedean's book, Bitcoin Standard, and that's kind of like what got me kicked off into the Bitcoin maxi lifestyle. Because before that, I was in trying to do like real estate blockchain stuff, just trying to figure out like how is this going to affect what I do. That maybe there's an opportunity for me to get in here just because I've always been kind of techie. I'm not a coder or programmer or anything, but I can build my own computer. That's about the extent. So then I just thought to myself, it's like, well, if we take Bitcoin's sound monetary principles and properties and all the whole umbrella of things that go into it, and we apply it to the built environment, which is basically the whole process of, real estate development. And then on top of that, city planning, on top of that, all the infrastructure, maintaining it. Basically, like if you go outside and you walk into another building, all the things on earth that had to happen before you could do that encompasses like the built environment. So it's like, okay, what did the world look like on a sound money standard in the built environment? And that kind of, I guess, I got way more into it in like 2019 to the point where I was talking to friends and family and all this other stuff, and they just couldn't take it anymore. I tried to pitch my dad this stuff just because he's been doing it for so long. And I had, it was funny. I invited him into my office and I have like a mobile whiteboard and I had all this information on it. And I was like trying to walk him through it. And he just had like zero interest. And I was just like, God damn it, Dad, this is affecting everything that we do. We got to get on this train and try and change everything. And he's like, nah, this doesn't make any sense. It's not working. I'm like, okay. So that was kind of a downer, but then I decided that like, well, maybe if my family and friends don't want to listen to me, maybe, Bitcoin Twitter will. So I had started something. I always wanted to write, and I just kind of like tested the waters, writing stuff for myself, seeing if I could, actually write. But it was actually a BitBlock boom. And Ryan Gentry, again, I was telling him, we were sitting at the bar. He was asking me what I do and all this stuff. And then he asked me what I did in Bitcoin. And I said, well, I don't really do anything in Bitcoin, but I'm trying to figure out like how this will affect real estate. And I've got some ideas and all this other stuff. And he basically said to quit being a pansy and just write. And I was like, oh yeah, that's probably a good idea. And he's like, no, seriously, just do it. He's like, no one's going to care. Like if you're wrong, you just change your ideas to fit, how Bitcoin works or reality. He goes, people will help you. He goes, it's a very, other than being a quote unquote toxic space, lots of disagreeable people, but at the same time, it's not, it's I would say it's more constructive criticism if you have thick enough skin to, take the punches and roll with it.
And if you approach stuff like earnestly, right?
Yeah. And it's, so that's kind of what I did. So I decided to approach it from the point of view of an exploration. And yeah, I kind of just started rolling from there. I think my first couple articles were pretty rough, but I have a newfound respect for the writers, especially you writing every day. I'm thinking to myself like, oh man, I do like 3 a week, and I'm over here just sweating, trying to get some of this stuff off my mind. But
Becomes muscle
yeah,
memory.
it's been a lot of fun. Yeah, now it's definitely getting easier, and I took a lesson from you just saying that, seeing something on Bitcoin Twitter or seeing something out and about, that like everything is an opportunity to write about something, and that you can relate it. Especially when it comes to Bitcoin and money, it's like, prices are the information that allows all of this stuff to happen. So yeah, I pinch myself every day that, Bitcoin exists and that this is where we are.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy you're writing about it because your content's very good and funny too. You got
Thank
some
you.
humor
Oh
running throughout
goodness.
the newsletter.
I guess that's just more of my personality. Like if I'm reading something and like there isn't like just a wisecrack or something witty, every once in a while I literally just start to nod off. So yeah, I'd like to throw something in there, see what everybody thinks. I would say probably not the most recent one, but the one that you had tweeted out probably has the most wisecracks of all of them. But I wanted to put it out there to see how it went.
Yeah, well, that's why I had to like DM you the one because I laughed so hard after reading it.
Yeah, the transphobic bathrooms from 100 years ago in the middle of the street.
Yeah, they weren't thinking, they weren't woke enough in Indianapolis back in the day.
Oh my goodness.
Let's jump into like the meat of the topic, like Bitcoin urbanism, and dive into like the strong towns thesis and how you believe this can help out. I guess we could start with like the public spaces article that you wrote. And
yeah, so the idea of public spaces is that, and I guess for all the freaks listening, we're gonna jump back and forth between like today, 2020, and then we'll go back like 100 years. So that's our time frame in context when we're talking. Things weren't built for financial purposes. So like today, everything that is built and everything that is done for financial purposes. It's a financialization game. So buildings are the way they are. They look the way they are. They're missing all the details. They're covered in glass. All of this stuff is for financial reasons. So it's basically the only way that you can build something and keep costs down and then be within, essentially a cap rate. But back in the day, things were built and done for the public environment. It was basically like a public enjoyment, right? So if you went outside and you had to be outside in public space, the idea was that like, well, if you've got to see all this stuff, you might as well make it attractive, and it might as well serve a purpose, right? It has to serve a purpose and it has to be beautiful, so that if you're going into these spaces, because you have to remember, most people spent their time working outside. They weren't behind a computer. They went to and from their jobs. Usually they just walked, even though the cars were around. I know, it's crazy, right? You couldn't imagine doing that today. So you would walk, or then, I think I was trying to remember. I wish I had the link to the page, but most, like 90% of all Americans back in the day were self-employed. So you didn't have people going from their home to basically one giant office, right? Or a giant place of work, essentially, where everybody's centralized in these little spots, hundreds or thousands of people at a time. So, everybody's out and about. And if you're in these public spaces, it's like, well, let's make it something to behold. Detroit used to be called the Paris of the Midwest. St. Louis was basically in a class of its own. Kansas City, all of these places were beautiful to just walk around and enjoy. And that kind of leans into, I always shill two authors I like, Ann Sussman and Justin Hollander. They wrote a book called Cognitive Architecture. So, classical architects basically use designs that, were tried and tested over time. and that they evoked a certain emotion in you, right? Or that you could observe things from different distances, right? So if you look at like a cathedral, which is a major public, what's the word? Not an icon, but essentially a staple in public, right? You could observe the form from different perspectives. So if you're a mile away, you can tell that it's a cathedral, right? Or if you're 100 feet away, then you can start seeing the details. And if you're within 10 feet, then you can see everything. So buildings were designed so that they were beautiful from afar, from near, and then basically up close. And as it turns out, with all the science and all the abilities that we have to monitor people's brains, that actually does have a physical effect on people. So the idea that beauty is subjective is absolute garbage. So in the public space, it's like, okay, we know from a classical standpoint that people are essentially emotionally moved when they see something beautiful, right? So the shapes, the bio, it's called biophilic. Yeah. So like the biological nature of shapes and the human experience over time, evolution, all of these things have an effect on people. So when you're in the physical, or when you're in the public space and you see buildings or you see monuments or, like the comfort station that I wrote about, all of these things are having an effect on you, and like you may not know it. Like, I don't know, are you familiar with Red Letter Media? They did the original review of the Star Wars episodes 1, 2, and 3.
I don't think so. I don't believe so.
It's absolutely hilarious. But they have a saying where it says, you didn't notice it, but your brain did. So it's one of those things where it's a subconscious occurrence, but it derives in your conscious as pleasure. So when you go outside and you walk around and you see like these buildings that are basically just 4 sides of glass, your brain literally ignores all of that. Just like you don't see it. Like it might as well not, it's physically there, but there's nothing for your eyes to look at. Whereas if you go and you stand in front of, a cathedral built, at the end of the 19th century, your eyes are occupied, your brain is occupied by all of the details. So whether that's the statues or the design on the door, or even, the steps, what does the bullnose on the steps look like? Like your brain notices all of that stuff and it has an effect on you. So yeah, that's kind of the built environment. It's a lot better than all the public art that we have today. Like for example, when I live in Scottsdale, and like 2 blocks from me, there's public art, and it's literally like a wireframe rabbit, and it's fucking 20 feet tall.
Probably got commissioned for hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Oh, I bet it was millions of dollars. And it's just like thinking to myself, like, I cry like a little bit inside every time I see that, because I know that observing it, my brain literally does not see it. So, what could have been better there? A figure on an obelisk, 20 feet in the air, 50 feet in the air, like Winfield Scott, the guy who founded the city. It's just like, none of these things are really taught or talked about anymore.
Oh.
It's just with the work that Ann Sussman and Justin Hollander are doing, it's like they're going into the built environment and they're actually tracking this stuff. They're able to show that, like, okay, well, if you've got a window here, and a door, like here's your eye patterns, here's what you're looking at, and then we can look at your brain and see, if like what areas of your brain are firing, and then like here's a 21st century building, and then it's literally just like blank.
Yeah, it's
crazy.
You brought up Manhattan as somebody who lived in Manhattan and Brooklyn for 7 years almost.
Yeah,
it's crazy. Like, so when I transition, like seeing like the West Village is my favorite part of the city by far.
Absolutely.
Like it is, like the way it's so romantic. Everything's old, best bars, best vibe, best food in my opinion. Like it's And it's just because it's beautiful. It's like walking, like my wife and I lived in Williamsburg, and Williamsburg, there's shit everywhere. It's all like houses, row homes built in the 80s with shitty siding. And we just get on the L train, rip it to 8th Ave, get out and walk through the West Village. And that was like our favorite thing to do. But then like also like living in Williamsburg, and we were a block away from the East River. So we'd be able to, when we didn't venture into Manhattan, we'd walk along the East River a lot, and you can see it very visibly from the East River, like sitting in Williamsburg looking over at Manhattan, just the combination of all these beautiful old buildings and these terribly built new buildings that just like, there's one particular too, like on I believe it's on like the edge of Central Park, the southern edge. It's just like got all these blocks sticking out, and just like sticks out like a sore thumb in the skyline. It's like, why the fuck did somebody build that building? It angers you, like you said, like it makes you cry a little bit inside. Like, why are you going to destroy the skyline?
Well, I think that's a good segue, especially when you're so like the row houses that you lived in. You know, you can tell that this was not constructed to the same level as something in the West Village. And it's like, to me, it's like, okay, doing construction, like I understand, first of all, I understand like why that was that way, or that it was built that way rather. And then knowing the time frame, it's like, okay, well, let's bring it into the monetary discussion. Let's bring it into the credit cycles. What did the credit cycle look like at this time? You know, so I can walk into a house in Phoenix and tell you, you know, when it was built within a couple of years. So like a house that was built in like 2006, and let's say that it's been cleaned and taken care of, but like nothing's changed. Like they haven't changed the light fixtures. They haven't changed the appliances, the countertops, cabinets, all that stuff. You can basically walk into that and see like, this is literally all the cheapest shit that they could possibly find. And they stuck it in here, and they literally sold it peak at the market, and their margin was probably like 25% on this house. It's just absolutely insane. But then if you go to a different period, let's say you went to like 2000, like the median, and we're all talking like median home stuff. We're not going any one direction or another. You can see that there's more details like on the front of the building, or when you get inside, there's more interior details. The countertops will be nicer, the layouts a little bit more comfortable, things like that. So it's crazy to see how fiat money and essentially like this, a symptom of that, the substitution effect with materials, plays into like the built environment. Because just like you said, you can look across the East River into Manhattan, and you can guess about when some of this stuff was built. So like if it was built, if it had to be built in like the 70s, it's probably going to be, sans a few details. Or if it's built like in the late 80s with the before the bust, they're going to use, it's basically just going to be a tall, narrow rectangle. They're going to use as much space as possible because these guys are getting paid, buku bucks per square foot that they're building. So they're going to try and get, it's the Donald Trump thing. He's going to try and get every square inch of buildable space that he possibly can because it is worth so damn much. And the question is, why is it worth so damn much? It's like, well, the cost of capital is like nothing at the time. So, now you've got a malinvestment where you're doing things that normally you wouldn't otherwise do. And for today, it's like, rates are back at 0%. The third, well, I guess it's the 10-year. So 30-year mortgages are essentially priced off the 10-year U.S. Treasury. So mortgages are back above 3% for a 30-year fixed loan. It got all the way down to like, I think maybe 2.65 or 2.68, something like that, which is like unheard of. That's almost like what the Fed says inflation is. I mean, you and I know it's like 8 or 10%, but it's like, what in the world is going on? And then for construction, it's like the last year has been absolutely insane. Like my lumber prices, when I started building the condo project that we're working on now, I was buying so a unit of 2x6 is 189 pieces. I was buying 2x6 for, I think it was like $350. per 1,000 square feet. So it's like, I don't know. I don't want to do that math. Maybe it's like $1,000, right? Now it cost me $5,000
Holy shit.
for that same unit of wood. I mean, yeah, it's just crazy. And it's one of those things where you can sign a contract all day long, but then you get a call from your lumber guy or the gal or whoever is working over there and just saying, yeah, sorry, we can't fulfill your contract because, this giant ass builder came over here and wrote me a check for 10% above market. So that was your lumber. Thanks for playing.
Holy shit.
It's just like, what on earth is going on? So all of these financial manipulations, they have second and third order effects. My last building that I've literally been trying to get built and framed for 6 or 7 months is just an absolute slog. And when it comes to monetary policy, if you've got somebody that can turn the levers, like this has real world effects, it has real world effects. It's gotten to a point where I was actually on site yesterday and our insurance inspector showed up, and it's like, I don't know, just after 9. And we kind of looked at him like, what the hell are you doing here? We didn't call you. Like the last thing that you want is just an inspector just showing up to your property saying, hey, how's it going? It's like, I didn't call you. What do you want? And he's just straight up, he's like, oh no, I was just driving by on my way home. I'm done for the day. And we were like, what? Even in construction in Phoenix, you can't start till like 6 a.m. or whatever. So this guy had driven to 9 jobs over the course of 3 hours. And he said he was done. And we're like, well, what happened? He goes, well, nobody's working. I go, well, what do you mean nobody's working? It's a boom. He goes, materials prices are so out of hand that a lot of the general contractors and owners have basically just put their sites on hold. And he goes from, small jobs, big jobs, our job might be like 10 or 15 million. He may go look at $120, $150 million deal, which has dozens of buildings that he's got to go through and look at different things. But he's just like, yeah, no, they just, nobody's working because they can't get any material, or the material prices are so out of hand that some of these owners can't raise additional equity, or they're just going to wait it out. And it's like, wow, that went from a boom to maybe on hold bust, like real fast. Yeah, so
it's not good. What are the materials guys saying?
No,
like, is it lack of supply, or just the demand shot up way too high last year as people bought new houses and got them remodeled?
It'd be both. So, yeah, right. And that is a part of it. Like the
Marty.
With the lockdowns, with the lockdowns. No, I didn't mean that. I like with the lockdowns and stuff like that. So people have been staying at home, and companies like Home Depot and Lowe's literally can't keep the shelves stocked because all of these people are spending time at home. They're not paying for gas. They've got on extra somewhere between an hour and a half and 2 hours a day extra, because that's normally what the average person spends driving to and from work, 45 minutes to work, an hour home. And so they've got all this extra time. They're stuck at home. They finish their work early because I wish I had saved some of these links, but I read a deal where people are accomplishing their work in like 60 or 65% of the normal time. So now they have all this free time. They're stuck at home. So they might as well fix their house, right? Or do something that, that they normally would have hired a contractor to do or wouldn't have had time to do. So in conjunction with that, then you have all the stuff that we get from China, which is FYI, basically everything for everybody that's listening. And that had like a serious effect on our buildings. So, all of the plumbing PVC, like the fire PVC. So like for your fire sprinklers, that's a different kind of PVC. The cast iron parts, almost all of the electrical components, your breakers, all of these things are coming from China. So then we started getting phone calls probably in like June or July last year. And they're like, yeah, so there's literally nothing available because it's coming from China or it's stuck on ships. And I'm sorry, but there's nothing for me to do for like the next month. So you're sitting here and wondering to yourself, like, oh my goodness, like, is this what this whole year is going to be like? So then it started that, okay, well, since it's not coming from China, we'll pay a little bit more to buy all this, all the American versions, because it's like 25 or 30% more expensive. So then that started happening, and then those prices started going up. So that led into the lumber problem. So lumber originally, I want to say in May or June, lumber fell by like 60%. And that was just on like the normal prices that I had been paying, because I got a proposal for a new project at the time, and it was like $65,000 to build 16 condos. Like, that's like nothing. And I was like, okay, well, this is crazy. And I was trying to sort out what had happened with my current job, because basically a whole building's worth of lumber was missing from the proposal, which is always fun. And I was like, hey, we gotta fix this. And literally within the span of 2 weeks, lumber comes roaring back. Not only does it come roaring back, it's like 50% above what the previous high was. And it's like, okay, that's kind of messed up. And it literally just kept going up and up and up and away. And that was kind of like when I started calling my lumber supplier, and I'm like, hey, I got to get these, this material, these beams, this plywood, all of this stuff. And he's like, Kelly, it doesn't exist. He goes, since everything slumped down so far, all of these mills basically just started turning off in the Northwest. So they don't really have any intentions of bringing them back on quite yet, even though lumber prices are out of control. It's like, oh, well, that's nice. And so then, like, lumber just kept going. Like, it's doubled since then. And it's like, have they turned on those mills yet? Because that would be awful nice. And they're like, no, not really. And then you've got Trump put the tariffs or the ban on. Well, because they're just printing money. There's nowhere else to get lumber. Because, like I was just about to say, I think Trump put a tariff on Canadian lumber. So there's like zero lumber coming across the border right now.
Okay.
And so my final shipment of I got 4 units of 2x6 by 12 took me 2.5 weeks to get. So it's nutty out there. And again, that goes back to the monetary discussion, where it's like, if you lower the price to do all these things, it's not, and you lower the price to do all these things, and all of these builders have all of these projects on deck, and they literally just sign the contract and say, deliver lumber now, and the whole world does it all at once, and of course there's not enough lumber. So it's crazy.
It's making me angry.
Oh yeah. I got a lot. I know you can't really see it, but I got lots of gray hairs.
Externalities exist.
Yep.
Who would have thunk it?
Oh man.
When did it end to stop?
Well, I'm a big fan of this thing called Bitcoin, Marty. You may have heard of it. And I think with Bitcoin, we can get rid of a lot of these issues. So, in the Bitcoin urbanism sense, it's like, well, I guess we'll talk about like strong towns. Just a quick reminder for the freaks. So strong towns has a couple different things that they have written and discovered, or not, I guess rediscovered would probably be the correct way to think about it. So there's the idea of the suburban experiment, which is that when we build stuff today, we build everything all at once to a finished state. So like if you live in a house or an apartment or whatever, before anybody could live there, it had to be like 100% done. The sidewalks had to be done. The landscaping had to be done and installed and manicured, watered, all of these things. That never used to be the case, right? You used to build a block at a time, and you may or may not have a sidewalk, or you may or may not have pavement. You may not have a storm sewer in the middle of the street to collect rainwater. So it's much different today than it was 100 years ago, even. So when you have to do all of these things and build all of these things, these streets for home subdivisions and all that stuff like this, that costs a lot of money. So all of these costs are rolled into the house. So when somebody goes to buy a house, if you go and buy a new house in a subdivision, like you're not just paying for your house, you paid for all of the infrastructure, the community pool, the community building, all the streets, all the sidewalks, everything. Like you paid for that. And that never used to be the case. Like you may build like one house next to the other, as you go, and then that may be a block, and then you have a new street, and then you build, 60 feet away from the other house. That gives you your street, your right of way, and all that. And you just did it like one at a time. Like it was a slow expansion outward, and then a slow growth upward over time. So that's the traditional development model. That's incremental growth, right? Slow changes over time, basically either to meet the market needs or your own needs. Today, it's like, no, you got to do everything all at once. So that's kind of where we are. So that's only possible with cheap debt, because let's say me as the builder, right? I can only build to sell at a certain price. So let's say that the median, I just did this, like the median cost of a house is like $350,000, right? So if I'm building a new house, usually those will cost a little bit more. So let's say it's $400,000. It might cost like $100,000 of that $400,000 to put in all of the infrastructure. And not only that, after I'm done, I have to give that to the city. So then the city's responsible for taking care of all of that, which gets into the mess of, okay, how much money does the city make? Are they planning to repair and fix all this stuff? In the life cycle of 25 to 30 years when all of this stuff starts breaking? Short answer is no. But, I couldn't do that. I couldn't build that $400,000 house unless I knew that you, Marty, could get a loan to buy this house with 30-year mortgage at 3%. And that is solely dictated, what you can pay is solely dictated by essentially your monthly income, right? So they look at your W-2s, then they look at your debt, what's your debt to income ratios, like all of these things. So it's basically like, what can you afford on a monthly basis to buy a house? So then I have to work it backwards essentially and say, okay, can I afford to put in a 30-foot wide street, or do I need to like try and get a 25-foot street passed by the city? And it's like, those are the things that builders have to think about when it comes to this whole mess. So with Bitcoin,
you're forced to operate this way.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I would say there's most of the development code is controlled locally. So there's a court case back in the day, Euclid versus Amber Realty. And I encourage the freaks to go look at the Wikipedia page and read it, because, if the stuff I've told you so far is aggravating, you've got to look up the justice's opinion on why the city has the right to tell you what to do with your property. And it literally boils down to, we think growth is growing too fast and too crazy, and someone's got to do something. So local communities, local governments, that's your problem. So that's where we are today. So when you go and try to build something, unless it's, the state tries to intervene, unless the state's trying to intervene, which some of them do, like Pennsylvania actually is. I talked to a developer from Pennsylvania on New Year's, and he was telling me the horror stories. So the horror stories that I have to go through at the county, he goes through at the state level, which takes him 18 months to get plans reviewed and approved, and which takes like 2 or 3 submittals, which is insane. But, there's not so much at the federal level unless you end up in the EPA's target in a wetland. So when you go and try and build something, it's basically all controlled locally. Like they have international codes and stuff that they've adopted, but these things are essentially, large cities that come together and say, hey, this is what we're doing. Oh yeah, that's what you're doing. Okay, let's incorporate that. And then everybody follows these same rules. So that's how that stuff kind of came to be. And that's why, everything looks the same pretty much everywhere. Not from like an aesthetics standpoint. But like, if you went to, I don't know, maybe like your house where you are, maybe your electrical socket is 18 inches above the floor, right? So that's like a standard code. That's kind of the thing that I'm talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
so then from
gonna say I'm currently living in like a cookie cutter shore house, like plastic siding, like cheap material. I think only gonna
I mean, it's just
it's
crazy.
The New Jersey, and like another code too. Like my aunt and uncle live on the bay, and they have a dock on the bay, and they recently, like 5 years ago, they replaced their dock on the bay, and fucking state, I believe, or the county, like had a drone fly over the bay and like taking pictures to make sure it was in code, and they were by like a foot, and they had to get it replaced again. It was like, what the fuck? Like they can do that? It was like not affecting anything, not affecting any traffic or anything. It was like,
so you used to get away with a lot of things before like all the GIS maps started coming out. So the military puts the satellites up in space and they take the high resolution photos. Well, they started selling those photos to municipalities because the municipalities could figure out that they could see who was doing things that were against code. So like if you built a shed in your backyard without proper approval, citizen, well, you got a fine, and they could prove it because they'd send you an aerial photo of your house and say this is not an approved structure, and since you've already built it, you need to prove that you complied with all of the codes and ordinances, and if not, you need to demolish it and start over. It's just like, what? Like, oh my goodness, this is like my tool shed that I built in my spare time, the last year. And it's like, yeah, no, sorry. Here's your $1,000 fine, and now you start over.
What the? That's so. Are we free, freaks? Are we fucking free?
No,
Can't
freaks.
Build a tool shed.
No. I mean, you can go. So like you can go to Home Depot and you see the sheds and stuff that you can buy and take to your house. Those are always within like the minimum square footage. So like if it's more than 20 square feet, then you're getting into some dangerous territory, citizen. Where's your permits? I talk about this on Twitter with people. People would be absolutely amazed at the level of control that local governments have over your property, like your house, what color, not so much the color, but like how big your doors can be, your window placement. I mean, even like down to like some of the material you use. So like when I take a project through the city, I go through the development review board, which used to be called the design review board, but that's, had to change that. And it's one of those things where it's like, well, I don't like that color. And these are, 7 people up on the board. Usually there's one council member that sits over it, and then all of these other people are nominated by council people or the mayor or whoever. And it's like, okay, well, I don't like that color. It's like, well, why not? It's like, well, I don't know. I just don't like it. You should change it. That's the conversation. Then they vote. Usually, it's a political process. So they'll vote one way or another. It's kind of if you've got a split decision board, then, you may have to politic a little bit. And like, that's building and development today. There's just so much bullshit. It's
so it's centrally planned all the way down.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the long articles and stuff that I wanted to write. And I had originally, I think it was Safadine. It was a long time ago. He had said something on Twitter, and I was like, hey, this is what I do. I'll send you an email. So I sent him an email, And it ended up taking me like 2 hours to write because I just, every time I wrote something, I was like, oh yeah, then I got to go through this step, and then I got to go through this step. And then this is what happens if they disprove it. I have to go back to step 3. And like, it just, like, it takes me anywhere for a year to 18 months just to get through like the initial process, just to get city council approval. This isn't like my construction plans being reviewed and approved or anything. This is just like, hey, this is my site plan. These are what the buildings are going to look like. These are the floor plans. And this is how it's laid out on the property. That's it. So, yeah, just the level of control and the total bureaucracy. I always say that the Soviet Politburo would be envious of the level of control that local cities have over what happens on people's property. And I really, truly believe that. It's a crying shame anymore. That's why everything looks the same. That's why, essentially, that's why everything is centralizing. You could say centralizing, but it's basically commercializing. So why there's only franchise operations, right? Because they know that they can comply with all of this stuff. They've got cookie cutter plans and general forms and stuff that they like to use, and they can just plop it down on a piece of land. Whereas like if you were just a layman, if you just went in there and say, hey, I bought a piece of land, I want to build a house. Like, these people don't help you. Like, when you go to the city, people think that, the guy behind the counter is going to help you, but you have to realize that you're like the 10th person that's come in and done that today. And he is so tired of having to have the same conversation over that he says, here's the link to the design standards and policy manual. Read this and then come back. Well, it's like, that thing's like this big. It's huge.
It's inches
thick. Now it's PDF page, so it doesn't really matter. It's like 800 pages with all of the the footnotes and the call outs to all these other different things and the details and stuff that you have to use. Like a simple example would be like a fence footing, right? So the city has a fence footing detail that you have to use. So then you've got to print that out and include that with your plans and all this other stuff. Like, New York City is a pretty good example because there's a whole profession called expediters. And they are the ones that, like, if I'm a developer, I get all my plans and stuff ready to go and I want to submit it to the city. Well, I don't submit it to the city. I hire an expediter. Expediter goes through my plans, make sure I have everything. And then they go down to the city and then they deal with all of that, all of the submittals, because they may submit something to the city and, the guy at the counter say, well, where's your form 17-5? He's like, oh, well, I don't need that because according to this, I have a form 5-7. It's like, these people, like, that's their whole job, is to make sure that you can actually submit plans and that they get through the city in a timely manner and that there's no BS, red lines and all this other stuff, because this process takes like months.
The opportunity cost of economic activity.
Yeah.
What expeditors be doing, like, product?
Okay, so let's go back to the $400,000 house example, right? Let's say it cost me, like I said, $100,000 in infrastructure for the subdivision. The Home Building Association publishes a report every year, or maybe it's every couple of years, where they talk about the estimated cost of government compliance. So government compliance is plan submittals, fixing red lines for regulatory remarks, like if you don't have the ADA spaces for somebody in a wheelchair to get from the front door to the bedroom, into the bathroom, into the kitchen, to turn around, open the dishwasher, all of this stuff. Then you throw in the time that it takes to go through this whole process, the cost for the zoning attorneys, the attorneys in general, the consultants, all this stuff. It's like 31.5% of the gross sale of the house is attributable to government compliance. So for that $400,000 house, it costs almost $130,000 worth of time, money, basically time and money to get to that point.
Insane.
Yeah.
I can't stop for some reason connecting the first part of the conversation of how these designs and the architecture affects our psyche And this part of the conversation where we're describing the opportunity cost and the misallocated capital caused by bureaucracy. I can't stop thinking about American Beauty for some reason. I don't know why, but like that movie, it's like the quietation of suburban, like at the beginning of the conversation, like how this affects us mentally with it. Like, is this cookie cutter city planning leading to oppression that's spiking, or at least fully, but it does play a significant role in all of it.
Yeah. So there's trying to think. I think I want to say it was Sigmund Freud, but like in the 40s and early 50s, one of the studies that was done by the government was like, okay, this whole like European conflict thing has got to end. So, you know, what is causing the problem? And one of the conclusions that they came to was that because everyone was living so densely, quote unquote, in cities, that was causing the animosity between people, right? And that's what was causing these world wars. Like that's what they're saying. Basically, bubbles up. That's why, you know, you get Hitler, or, you know, why all these people worship monarchies, all this other stuff, which is totally asinine. But their response was, okay, well then let's do this. Let's promote living in a way that people are nearby but still separated, and that they have their own space, and that they're quote unquote not living on top of each other like animals. So what do you have? You have the birth of the American home subdivision, where you've got individual house for individual families separated by, 10 feet, whatever. Everybody's got their own white picket fence, 2.5 kids and a dog. And we'll call it the American dream. So that was the beginning of the American dream psyop for moving out into, quote unquote, the country, have your own little home. And over the years, and I read this a while ago, of course, I'm terrible at saving links, but they did do a psychological study where when you live in, let's say that you live in the West Village, right, where everybody's quote unquote living on top of each other. Like those people actually have a social affinity for their neighbors and the people that live within their neighborhood, right? And if you flip the script onto the American subdivision, it's literally the exact opposite, where these separated homes in these subdivisions don't promote social interaction. It promotes isolation, right? So these people live in their homes. It's their own quote unquote little castle, but it's more like a dungeon because they're trapped. They don't interact with their neighbors. In fact, most of the time they hate their neighbors. If you've ever been to an HOA meeting, that nobody likes anybody, and that there's always the tyrant that gets in control of the HOA. And it's like, okay, well, the American subdivision experiment isn't working because it's part of the reason that nobody talks to each other, mostly because they're not forced to interact walking up and down the stairs or going in and out of the same building, or even
walking to work. You got to drive.
Walking to work, all this other stuff. So like you're essentially socially isolated from the time you wake up in the morning, right? Take care of your kids or whatever, get ready for work, go to work, and you hop in your car and you drive by yourself to your office. So your office is where you have most of your social interactions. So on top of that, what do you listen to? You listen to podcasts or the news, all these other things that are, may or may not be attempting to, reinforce some social idea or paradigm. So you're not getting any interaction other than the things that you want to hear. And as we know, like from, basically 2015 on, that, especially like a lot of the woke ideas, like these parasitic ideas, basically take hold and proliferates to a degree where we saw last year, where everybody's worried about getting canceled, right? I guess even now. Everybody's worried about getting canceled, threats of physical harm, all of these other things. And it's like, you living in this house, like you literally don't interact with your neighbors or anybody else who might even have a slightly different take on life or a take on like what's going on. There's no social cohesion really in these neighborhoods unless, it's like a co-op or something like that, or like a super private gated subdivision. A lot of times, when you find social cliques and stuff like that, they'll all live, near by each other, mostly for social affinity. But the average person, no way, they're like living on an island and they're not even interested in talking to their neighbor. So, from a mental health perspective, like this whole thing is an absolute mess.
We got to pick how does Bitcoin fix it? You were like, we just went on like a 20-minute tangent as you were against.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so then for me, how Bitcoin fixes this, without the credit being provided for me as the builder to go through all of this brain damage and do all of this work, like it therefore can't happen. So you have a limited amount of money, right? And then it has to find the highest and best use, right? So, value is subjective, blah, 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 blah. But, at the same time, like babies are born every day, and in 18 years, 20 years, 25 years, like they gotta live somewhere, right? They're not going to be living at home. Maybe there's definitely an argument for intergenerational living, which I'm a proponent of, just because that's how things used to be. But at the same time, like there is going to be demand regardless. So the cities can't basically just bury their head in the sand and say, well, no, you need to comply with all this. Still, it's like, okay, I can't make those numbers work. Like it doesn't work, whether the US dollar continues to inflate into oblivion slowly, or whether it goes more rapidly through like a hyperinflationary event, like who knows, but something's got to give. And I'm a believer that, Bitcoin is both the immovable object and the unstoppable force, right? It's going one direction and it's very difficult to change, if change at all. So what's going to win? A city's, setback rule, or the fact that Bitcoin is sound money, doesn't really care, and that unless you start changing your own rules, how are you going to compete in the built environment, right? People are going to go elsewhere. Miami is a perfect example of this. Mayor Francis Suarez, right? He's taken the orange pill, it would seem, and is kind of starting to go down that path where he's recruiting, Silicon Valley firms, Bitcoin-minded people, all of these things. So like we all know, like once you start going down this path, like you get sucked into the black hole, and then you find yourself tumbling down the rabbit hole, and then you come out the other side like, oh man, like everything is not okay. Yeah, basically. So to me, it's like, okay, you've got this unstoppable train coming through your town. So you can either get on board or you are just going to get rolled over like you can't believe. So on top of that, all of these cities are financially bankrupt, right? Chuck talks about this a lot. Nobody accounts for anything correctly. So our fictitious subdivision that we built, that cost me $100,000 to put the infrastructure in. The city doesn't make enough money to replace that infrastructure without increasing new growth. So a Ponzi scheme. So then we roll it back to Bitcoin. Okay, well, you can't just create unlimited debt out of nowhere, because that ends up very badly. So now you've got a new hard money emerging. Open source can't be controlled by anybody, can't be co-opted by anybody. It just is. So that's our unstoppable train rolling through town. So, okay, well, we know everything's broke, and we've got to go back to a point where we're generating wealth. Like all of this infrastructure, all of these buildings has to pay for the infrastructure that serves it. Like there's just no other way to do it, because this whole living on debt thing is just like living on a prayer. Like you're going to have a really hard time facing reality when your bills come due and your water doesn't work anymore and the sewer's not flowing right. Like, these are all real world problems that are going to occur when you can't afford to fix your infrastructure. So I think it's one of those things where it's like, okay, well, let's turn the history pages back, a century or so, and see how people were building. Like how did they afford to have or install the water or the sewer back in the day, or, the sidewalks in the street? And it's like, well, your building has to be financially productive. End of story. And if you want to have these setbacks, well, sorry, but my building doesn't make enough money because I don't get enough lot coverage, because I can't, or I can't build a coffee shop below my apartment so that I can live above it and then work below it. Or like if you're, a butcher, for all the toxic carnivores out there, if you want to open a butcher shop and live above it with your family and all this stuff, well, sorry, can't do that. You violate the floor area ratio principle. You don't have enough parking, which is mandatory. So it's like all of these things that are like nice to have, the citizens, berated their local governments over, like it doesn't work. It's the free ride. And it's been paid for by debt for so long that eventually that game ends badly, as it always does. What's the saying that fiat money is unblemished by success? So, it's one of those things where the 20th century and how we built things and how we did things is, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, goodness gracious. It's basically like the one time that we tried something and it's like, hey, this works. But in reality, it's like, no, it was never done that way.
I'm gonna leave.
Yeah.
No. The word we're looking for here?
Yeah, I don't know. See, this is why it takes me so long to write things, because I'm just like, I gotta go look up some synonyms.
Struggle.
Yeah.
I've got bad vernacular.
Yeah. But it's basically like, okay, so this is the blip on the radar. So this is like this is the obscure occasion where this happened. And it's like, okay, well, let's not do that again. But we've been doing it for so long that now you've got, 2, 3, and going into 4 generations of people who think that this is like the only way to do something. So it's like, okay, well, now they don't know any better because nobody ever studied this stuff. And it's been totally walled off from architecture schools, planning schools, all this other stuff. And from my perspective, it's like, no, just like fiat money, these last 50 to 60 years was the one-off deal. It's like, okay, well, we got to get back to like normal, because there's a lot of things that are messed up. And, this is not right. This is not right. Something's wrong.
It's a lot of actual debt pulling future production, present day. And then it's like infrastructure, technical. What I loved about Strong Town, acutely highlights the infrastructure that we're accruing. It's like, holy shit, insane.
Yeah.
And I guess like let's imagine that we easily transition to a Bitcoin and all these economic object and the unstoppable force of Bitcoin is change on the markets. What do we do?
You're cutting out pretty bad, Marty.
Oh, yeah. I think it's my mic thing. Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Audio issues on TFTC, nothing new. So what I was saying is like the like, again, Chuck acutely highlights the infrastructure debt that we're accruing as a society with this subdivision mentality, this coded sort of framing that we have to work within. Again, let's imagine that we transition to a Bitcoin standard and we the economic forces just force the market to change for the better. What do we do with all this, like all these subdivisions, all this like laid pipe, all this road? Do we like have like a controlled demolition and like reuse the materials in some way?
I certainly think that's possible. If you let's say, to be very toxic, like if you got rid of, minimum wages or all of like these quote unquote child labor laws and stuff like that, and you basically got to a point where, we've screwed up so bad and now we're in a new place. So how do we fix all this stuff? And I think that the answer is to, start from first principles. It's like, okay, well, we know that the traditional development method is how things have worked or been done for thousands of years. And America is a little bit different from Europe because we don't have any external, enemies that are going to come over and raid our town. So we don't need to build a wall. We're not confined, to a specific geographical space. So I think that a lot of the populations are going to be forced, not like saying collapse in on themselves is not the correct context, but it's like, okay, they're going to have to come and start anew from the middle, basically the center of town, and then work themselves back out.
Yeah.
They're going to have to.
I was going to say sports analogy here, like lacrosse. Everybody knows I love the sport of lacrosse. Like that's one thing when you're in a fast break and you're getting back on defense. That's like to solidify the defense. You get in the hole and then you work out from there. Like it's like get in the hole. Like this is how we set up the defense. Like get in the hole and work out from there.
Right. And I think that when you add in the financial productivity argument, there's going to be all sorts of little pockets all over different towns where the real estate is financially productive. And I think that those areas will become, new centers of town. They'll evolve over time to be a quote unquote, Main and Center Street intersection. And that, you just work out from there. But you've also got to consider like how the utilities are set up, because a lot of times these utilities are centralized. Like you may have 2 or 3 sewer plants, in Scottsdale, or maybe there's 5 or 6 in Phoenix. Well, you've got to go and take care of those, right? You can't just let all that stuff go to waste, or, you've got your power plants, electrical substations all over the place. Like you still have to take care of these things. Will they be as active? Like probably not, because let's say that in our fictitious subdivision, 30 years later, the sewer pipe goes bad and the people living in that HOA can't afford to replace it themselves, right? Normally that would be the city's responsibility. So it's like, okay, well, now we don't have sewer, so we probably ought to move. Let's see what's going on. And if, Bitcoin's around and all of these codes and stuff go away, like there will be a market response. The market will provide. So if I, in my position as a guy who wants to build and develop, beautiful buildings on Main Street and all these other things, like you better believe that I'm going to be over here building, mid-rise buildings with all of the functioning utilities I can possibly get into it to attract people to solve their problem. I'm going to get paid for that. That's the beauty of the profit motive. So, you're basically trying to start over. You're going to have a semi-difficult time, anyways, because you've got all of this infrastructure that, you have to basically maintain for basic necessities. But like, will the interstate or, state freeway stack get repaired and replaced? Probably not. Not for a long time. And on that note, I guess there's lots of interesting things happen around. I want to say it is in Lafayette, Louisiana, where they are trying to get the interstate that basically divides their city removed to spur growth and to basically save the city's financial, their balance sheet and all these other things. So on the standard, it's like, okay, well, we've got to go back to first principles. These are the areas that work. Why do they work? And let's emulate them, And on top of that, it's like we have the internet. We can communicate these things, one way or another. And there's got to be some freaks that are interested in this. So then you've got people that, are willing to put themselves out there to discuss and solve the problem. So, it goes back to one block at a time, one house at a time. You remove the, I guess, similar to the people who benefit from all these rules, like a cantillionaire benefits from the financial spigot, whoever, whichever developers are benefiting from the fact that nobody can, not anybody can just show up to build something, that stuff all has to go away in order to solve the problem. Otherwise, you would never be able to fix things fast enough or effectively enough. So, yep. One Bitcoin house at a time.
It's all so borked. It's all
Yeah.
so borked, man.
I know. And I've said on Twitter too, or in my newsletter rather, that I really do think that the entire real estate market, building, development, all this stuff for the last, at least since World War II, has got to be the greatest malinvestment in history.
You think so?
Yeah, I really do. All of the old down, especially east of the Mississippi. I retweeted a photo the other day of, I think it was Cleveland, Ohio, where they had like an aerial photo from the 30s, I want to say, and then they have a GIS photo today, and it was like, downtown had been totally decimated. I think it was like there was like less than 40% of the original buildings in lot coverage in the area, and then they had like the freeways rolling through, the on and off ramps, and all of the parking lots. The parking lots don't generate income. Like, they can charge you for it, but they've got to go out there and fix the concrete after each winter. They've got to do all these different things, but it's like, maybe those lots are occupied for 30% of the time, because you got to include night there. You've got to include to and from work, these peak hours, all these different things. So it's like, this is not financially productive whatsoever. So they've basically gutted themselves without realizing that they did it. And the only reason that they can afford it is because money is cheap and debt is widely available.
Oh man, it's also exciting.
Yeah.
You get to fix this problem. There's
Yeah.
a lot of work to be done. This is a jobs opportunity. I'm smelling jobs to rework all this. How can we frame this narrative for the cantillionaires and the socialists out there who just want us to keep printing money?
Well, I would say instead of learn to code, it would be learn to plumb or learn to be an electrician. All of these skilled trades, they get like the butt end of the deal. As far as like the Cantillon waterfall, like they're the farmer at the very bottom. They're the ones that are getting totally hosed over. Just like the average man, woman, child, like they have no idea that this stuff is going on. They have no idea, all these outside forces that are affecting them or why or all this stuff. And it's like, okay, well, you can't be angry at essentially a small group of people that have access to a system that of course they're going to use. Like, it's human nature. Like if you have regulatory capture, so to speak, of the Federal Reserve, which, like Wall Street banks, the hedge funds, all the stuff, they basically do. It's like, well, of course they're going to, but it's like, let's turn it back. All of these good paying available jobs that are better than staring at your screen or working in a call center, like these things exist. Like, people like to make fun of plumbers, but it's like, have you looked up the average income of a plumber recently? It's, some of them are over $100,000. This is not, it's not a low level or menial job that's, below people. It's
doing
a good
work. They're doing work with their hands. They're getting out. They're not sitting on their
Yes.
fat asses behind a desk just crunching Excel sheets. They're probably
Yeah.
actually living life better than you.
And I talk to guys on my job site all the time, and they're like, "Oh, I wish I was sitting in an air conditioned office." I was like, "Well, you can have air conditioned problems too. So if you want to hand me that shovel and you can go to the office, I'll gladly switch you for a week or two." It's just like, I grew up. My family has a farm and a ranch, so I've always been outside doing things with my hands and doing stuff, and I find that much more enjoyable sometimes than the stuff that I do. I mean, I love building plans and designs and put some stuff together, but it's just, all of the symptoms and like nth order effects that like fiat money has on, the whole process is just totally aggravating. Just doing things that I shouldn't have to do, or people cutting corners and, contracts falling through because lumber goes up 5x. Just it's just one of those things where it's like, something is wrong and let's take a look at it. And now we have this tool in Bitcoin as, open source hard money, and that it really does fix this to a degree. Will it supplant the dollar? I mean, it doesn't have to. I don't think so, but it can roll back a lot of these really, really bad decisions. And that, maybe this is like the weak men create hard times, the hard times create strong men. It's like, well, maybe this is our opportunity to do something. That's how I look at it. Like, sure, I'll show up. I'll be that guy. And I think that maybe as millennials that, we've been badgered by older generations as being absolutely, worthless, just like every younger generation is. It's just say, okay, well, I'm here to fix and solve your problems, not because, I'm just trying to suck up or anything, but I'm just going to fix it because I'm tired of your crap. So, that's I just want to fix it because I just want beautiful buildings, Marty. That's just, if I have to see another Taco Bell, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Completely agree. It's like, how do you think your building design would change if you didn't have to fit into this city code living?
Well, so I mean,
Kelly's looking around his apartment or his house right now. Excuse me.
Yeah. So it's more about building. To me, it's more about building like some smaller things. It's given my favorite building is like the 2 or 3 story brownstone building, right? You've got like a little retail shop on the first floor, maybe an office on the second floor, and then above that usually it's just residential. So I want to build stuff like that, and I like if I never built another building that has stucco on the exterior again, I would probably be the happiest person on the planet. It's just that like you can swap out these materials that you're required to use. You can stop doing or stop following all of these like general design requirements. Like, so I'm in, Scottsdale, like every building is either brown or light brown or tan or slightly tan or white. Like that's it. And that's all that you're allowed to do. So to me, it's throwing out that whole book and designing buildings, looking at buildings that are aesthetically pleasing with the different details. I don't have to be, like outside of my apartment right now, there's a 6-lane street with a median in the middle that's got to be like 15 feet wide. So from me to the next building, it's probably close to like 100 feet. That's not like a good use of space. So it's redesigning, the sidewalks in the streets, narrowing the streets. Then that gives you more space for your buildings, or you can put, multiple buildings, put a little like park on the inside, all the stuff, just like the level of creativity that you have, just goes through the roof. And that's just the stuff that I want to do, it just, bums me out that, this is kind of how it goes. And that's not to say that like, the only thing anybody should ever build is a 3-story brownstone. Like, no, like build your high rises, build your mid rises, all that stuff. Just at least make it look nice and not a giant piece of glass.
Right. So that's another question I have is like, has this trend towards this cookie cutter building, cookie cutter design, has it led to like a dearth of architecture talent? Right? Like, can we even build those beautiful buildings moving forward? Because people are so removed from the era in which they were built.
Yeah. And there's actually, so I guess you could say like on classical architecture Twitter, there are, vocal accounts that talk about this. I mean, even some of them, Eric Boomstra started his own like little classical architecture school, like an online school. There's a Charleston architecture account that posts a lot of the work that they're doing. It's all like classical sense, and they get out there with forks and knives and, defend the classical, the classical ways, the old ways of doing these things, and they can articulate, much better than I can, because I'm not an architect. I read some of these books and I'm just like, okay, that sounds nice. But there definitely are people out there, and they talk about, or I guess they share a lot of the experiences that they have with people that come to them and say, hey, I just spent like 6 years in architecture school and I hate everything about it. Like, why didn't I know about, arches or columns, or, why isn't an ionic column like this? Like, why didn't I learn about any of this? Why is the window placement like this? Why is my building, why are these ratios, these floor ratios like this? And then they basically come to learning that they didn't learn anything. Right. So there's a meme.
I feel sympathy as somebody
Yeah.
who got an economics degree. I feel a lot of sympathy with these people.
Oh yeah. And I'm the same way. Like I spent all that time in college. I graduated college, I think I was 24. I did a victory lap, so I had a little extra time. But I've basically spent like the last 10 years unlearning absolutely everything I've ever learned, to the degree of like, economics, planning, architecture, design, all of these things. Because they're at some point in the early 20th century, like somebody just put up a wall on all the knowledge that existed before then, and they just said, no, you don't need to look over there. Here's everything that you need to know. So now it's one of those things where it's like, okay, well, somebody finally got a ladder, went over back to the wall, took all of the crap to get there, and just peeked over to see what was going on, and basically saw that it was great, and started bringing all that knowledge back over. And I really do think that that's kind of what's happening, and that, the internet is awesome, absolutely awesome. And, stuff like Twitter, you take the good with the bad, but all of the information that, like, if you really wanted to go find a niche, like, you really could. So like when I stumbled onto like classic architecture Twitter, I was like, oh my goodness, like, this is great. Like, I'm not just reading a book, but I can interact with the people who actually do this for a living and believe in all this stuff. And, they used to be on an island, and now they have all sorts of counterparts all over the world talking about these things, sharing the knowledge, and then creating informational products to share with other people. And it's just like, to me, it's just like Bitcoin, where it's like, it's an idea whose time has come, so we'll watch out.
Yeah. No, I love classical architecture. Twitter, Wrath of Non, obviously being the GOAT.
Wrath of Non is good. There's a bunch of guys that post stuff like that. Wrath of Non has always been a good one.
I've DM'd with him. I've tried to get him on the podcast. He's a bit shy.
Yeah, I don't think he does public appearances. I've interacted with him a bunch over the years, but yeah, because I'm pretty sure. Well, I know he's based in Japan. Mm-hmm. There's lots of actually good architecture. I think one's like at Architecture Japan. There's lots of good.
You have a list on Twitter?
Japanese architecture. Yeah.
You have a Twitter list?
No, I'll put one together though.
Yeah, could you do that? Because I would actually love to throw that on my tweet deck.
Yeah.
I'm too lazy. I'm contracting out work.
As me too. I'm too busy yelling at subs, and I always forget to do things like that. But yeah, no, there's lots of good accounts that put these photos together, then they talk about the designs and why they're that way. Like the Japanese use of wood is legendary for longevity and reuse, and not ever using a nail to preserve the wood. Like, it's crazy. It's crazy world we live in, Marty. I mean, goodness gracious.
Yeah. And I like to think I enjoy quality aesthetics. Like, going back again to the beginning of the conversation, I completely agree. Like, beauty is not subjective. Like, it is objectively beautiful or not. And it's very palpable having lived in cities. like Philadelphia, New York. Chicago's actually like a weird anomaly where they've kept good architecture and good aesthetics throughout the city. And that's actually a great case study. Like they had the opportunity to rebuild the city from scratch due to the Chicago fire, and basically learning from the mistakes of the original design of the city. They added back alleyways so the trash wasn't on like the front street facing, wasn't on the sidewalk. They brought in architects from all over the world to have like a diversity of beautiful buildings from different sort of regions of the world. But like Philadelphia, focus on Philadelphia specifically, where I grew up, where I was born and raised, where I plan to settle down and plant my roots in the ground at some point in the next few years. Even though people are
for everybody in Austin, they should probably just plug their ears for that.
Yeah, part. I don't know. Like I'm gonna make my Austin trip in a few weeks here. I'm gonna stay for 2 weeks. I'm gonna feel it out. I have an open mind about it, but and there's something about Philadelphia that just draws me in and it always drags me back. But Philly is in dire straits in my mind. And I don't know if anybody from Philly's listening to this and you're just like, fuck you, Marty. You haven't been back to Philly in 11 years. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? But I do go back. I visit family. I spend extended periods of time in the city. And it's just like the city government's fucking everything up. And it's like you have, I mean, City Hall is beautiful. Like we still have cobble brick roads that are beautiful. Like Independence Hall, beautiful. I really want to preserve that. I think Philly does actually have like a good aesthetics board and really focuses on the horticultural society, specifically focuses on making public spaces beautiful. My cousin actually worked for them for a while and did some really good work there to make sure that there were beautiful public spaces in Philly. But it's like I want to make sure everything's preserved. Like there are pockets of Philly, mainly where I grew up in the northeast section of the city, where you had these cookie cutter row home designs that are just not made to last. And so for me, like I like big stone houses as well. Like I want a stone house with like a lot of rich wood, fireplaces, a study.
Yeah, fireplaces are my favorite.
Same. And I said, I'm sitting next to like a gas fireplace right now. I'm like, this is a Fiat fireplace.
Does it have the glass in front, or can you at least touch the flame if you
No, it's got the glass. It's full Fiat.
Ooh, full Fiat.
Fireplace. Yeah, that's all I wanted, just like a wood burning fireplace and a stone house with a study in a backyard. And you can get that in Philadelphia in some parts of the city.
Yeah, I mean, and that's to go back to, I guess, in history, there were single family homes, like quote unquote row homes and all that stuff. But if you wanted an estate in the countryside, so to speak, or a plot of land, you could certainly do it. Whereas today you've got to pay for all the infrastructure to be brought. Like if you didn't want to have, like power, or you want to drill your own well and stuff, like you could do that. You could be self-sufficient on your own little island out there. And now it's no way. That's one of the things that, the sticks and carrots and stuff that the city will use to get you to comply. I mean, you can't even build something without, like if you wanted to have, if you were I guess inside city limits, like you couldn't try to build like a solar paneled powered home and not be connected to the grid. Like the city would never even give you a permit for something like that.
You can't collect
not to say
rainwater. It's like, what the fuck? How can you stop collecting water from the sky? Like what?
Yep. That's just the level of insanity. And on like a Bitcoin standard, so to speak, like I just haven't been able to figure out how a city or a town can pay to enforce all of the garbage that they've got on the books. I really think that's only possible because of debt finance and all of these, the growth Ponzi scheme, all of the money flowing in. Like if they didn't have that, like, could they even pay to enforce these policies? And I think not. And I think that's another wonderful thing about, Bitcoin as a hard money, is that, all of this stuff that somebody's got some pet project or pet policy objective that they want to do, Like it can't be paid for. So sorry, go to the next town over. Better luck there.
Right. Let's end it on an optimistic note, right? Like the first part of fixing a problem is identifying the problem. I think we're doing a very good job for the last hour and a half of it, identifying a very, very big problem, a problem that you believe will be looked back upon as the largest misallocation of capital in human history, which is pretty insane.
Yeah.
It's crazy that's all going on, and like nobody realized it as it was going on. Like,
no, it's just you. I mean, I said this at one point in my newsletter. It's like sorry, not sorry. But now that you walk outside and you look at a building or you look down and look at the street and you're like, oh my goodness, where did this come from? How is it being paid for? And how will it be paid for in the future? And it's like, oh boy. Like this, I mean, I don't want to say I drive around like in a mode of existential crisis, but I pretty much do. Being the guy who writes a newsletter about this. But, the whole point, of my writing and the thinking and the stuff that, I try to share and get people to think about, like with Bitcoin, is that like, no, like we can fix all of this. Like we know, like you said, we've identified the problem. We identified how the problem became to be, and now we have a solution. Like we have the solution. It's there. So now we just need to get to a point where we're changing the world around us so that we're congruent with reality. Like I don't know, I'm jacked up. Like that's something that I look forward to doing, buying up whole city blocks in my little town and rebuilding.
right.
So
It's a good admirable life's work, right? Or goal of life's work. It's let's go fix this shit, Kelly. Like
that's right.
Like fuck all this. We need to go fix it. Like it's time. No more waiting. That's the beauty of Bitcoin too. Like you can actually fucking like move to fix this like right away. Like you can just like, all right, we have the ability to opt into the system. The system will help us fix all this shit. Opt in. Let's go. No more moping. No more waiting. Like, let's be active. No more waiting for the politicians to fix it. We can fix this. You just got to act, stack sats, and start spreading these ideas and helping to identify the problem. Let people know. Freaks, if you're listening to this, I want you to go tell 10 people that we have this problem. Make it clear to them that this is a problem. Just send this episode to them. It's a growth hack as well as like it's doubling as a growth hack and a PSA to everybody out there.
Play it at your local HOA meeting if you're brave enough to go.
Ooh, that's a good idea. We need these messages to propagate. And that's actually one thing. After I interviewed Chuck last year, I bought Strong Towns for my dad. And I think that you freaks know this as well. He runs a coffee shop and a couple restaurants in our hometown, and like it like blew his mind, like the revenue per square foot. That metric alone is just like mind bending when you come to understand it.
Yep. I was blown away by, I think they did the math where you had to, in order for the typical American subdivision to pay for the replacement of the infrastructure, the city's portion of your property tax would have to double every year for like 15 years just to pay for the next installment and upgrade of your infrastructure, which is, if you've ever paid property taxes, you think to yourself like, what? Like I already pay like, $2,000, $5,000, $10,000 a year. And you said it's going to double for how long? So yeah, it's crazy, but Bitcoin fixes this because Marty, you and I are out there fixing it. We've got this tremendous force behind us in Bitcoin. And I mean, amen to that. Like I said, all jacked up.
If you're listening, join us. You can join us. It's as simple as stacking some sats, $10 worth, $20 worth. You could easily do it on the Cash App. No, I'm kidding, but like you can join us. We're ending on an optimistic note. Join us. We can fix this. Let's be proactive. No more moping. Kelly, where can we find out more about you, Bitcoin Urbanism, and your efforts to help educate the world about the problems as well as the solution to the problems? You're both identifying and providing.
Well, let's see. I have a Twitter account. It's at KTLANNAN. And then for the writing, it's just at Bitcoin Urbanism. So the word urban and then ISM. And then the newsletter is bitcoinurbanism.substack.com.
All right. Check it out, freaks. Go subscribe. Again, I've been loving it. I love your writing style. I love the subject you're writing about. Thank you for doing it. Thank you for joining me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
That's all we got for this episode, freaks. We'll be back at some point in the future. Peace and love.